history. I started getting like 30,000 fan letters a week. I had offers from motion picture companies, recording companies, concert promoters for over $1 million, and I was in blue jeans, literally, when that happened.
How much?
Millions. Millions of dollars. Yeah.
How did it feel? Were you able to handle it?
Well, I was going through a very difficult period inside. No one knew this, of course, at the time, not even my manager. But I was born, I found out later, with a chemical imbalance in my brain. It's called acute genetic depression. So even from the time I was an early child, I was afraid of everything. I was afraid to go out of my house. I was afraid to, naturally, to go on stage. I was afraid to, after I married Nancy Sinatra, I was afraid to get up in the morning and say, "Good morning, honey." It was terrifying. So even though it went on for 5 to 7 years, I couldn't enjoy it.
With all the adulation and millions, you really mean millions, and all of this happening inside, somebody's hiding there, scared, instead of proud and rich, and you're our dream.
I was frightened to death. And it was torture.
Tell me how that feels. Give me an example of a moment that would epitomize that.
It's like, before I did the Singing Idol, my father was with me here in New York. I came in town, and for 2 weeks, literally, I didn't eat. I would throw up maybe 10 times a day. My hands were ice cold. They said, "Oh, he's a serious actor," because I never spoke to people, except when I was on the set and I had a scene to do. And luckily, that was the kind of character that I was supposed to be in the play, in the drama. But I was frightened to death, and I was my whole life. It has a happy ending, but it took 30 years to get there.
Let's talk about the bad times. You're there. What happened?
Well, the success went on. My depression went on at the same time. I made more and more money. My brother was my business manager. He invested the money. Then I met and fell in love with Nancy Sinatra. And we were married for about 5 years. And during that period of time, after about 5 to 6 years of this enormous success, suddenly the British invasion happened, and my marriage started falling apart.
Why?
I found drugs for the first time in my life. I found that by taking pills, uppers and downers, I felt normal as a human being, like all the rest of the people that I saw around me for the very first time in my whole life. And so I became addicted to pills.
How bad?
Well, it wasn't so bad when I was married to Nancy. Our marriage ended and really had nothing to do with drugs. But shortly thereafter...
What did it have to do with?
It had to do with a lot of problems that go on between any married couple. By the way, I've just finished a book, and it's very complicated and detailed, but if you want to know about not only Nancy and my love affair, but Frank Sinatra from the inside, read my book.
Not fair. Tell me...
I mean, it's a long story.
Just tell me one thing about being Frank Sinatra's son-in-law that I wouldn't know, and I'll let it drop.
It was very difficult because I didn't know much about Frank Sinatra. Elvis was my idol. James Dean was my idol. I didn't know about Frank Sinatra, literally. And when I married into that family, I was awestruck. I saw his friends around him. I saw the power and the charisma he had. And suddenly, I began to idolize the man and secretly to want to be him. Now, that sets yourself up for a tremendous failure because nobody can be Frank Sinatra. There's only one. There only has been one, and there probably never will be another one.
So he didn't need a copy.
He didn't need a copy, and I didn't need that kind of, problem. I had my own.
We have you up there. Now we're going on a slide down.
Right. The marriage is going,
how bad
the career
is down?
Is going.
Give me a story about how bad down is.
It finally gets real bad when Nancy and I divorce, and I moved to Hawaii to try and put my head together. I'm still continuing to work, but now I'm like a lounge singer. I'm a working act that goes anywhere around the country, anywhere I can to work. And all of a sudden, I remarried for a second time in Hawaii, still using drugs, remarried, and all of a sudden I had an acute renal failure. They told me that I was dying. They put me on a kidney dialysis machine, and I was scared to death. I
prayed. Did you have any money?
I had a little money, but I thought for sure I was dead. I prayed that night with a sincerity and a desperation that I've never used before. And in 1 week, Sally, I was off the dialysis machine. That was 15 years ago. I've never again had another kidney problem. And this goes along with my own personal belief that God works in many ways, some in the supernatural and miraculous ways, and I have another example for later on in how he works among men to set things right in a life. But that was the low point of my drug addiction.
Before I let you go, what's it like to be the big star, Frank Sinatra's son-in-law, and a lounge act? I've seen lounge acts where only 3 people showed up.
I've been there.
On stage, performing.
When less than 3 people showed up.
And it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and there is nobody, and the 3 people are there to drink. They're not
That's
there to
right.
see you.
They're not there to see
How do
you.
you feel?
Well, it's a real adjustment that you have to make. And I wasn't very sound
How'd you
mentally
make
or
it?
psychologically, just by toughing it out and by doing it. And later, in the mid-'70s, I had a daughter. And then I wanted to get off drugs more than ever before. And coincidentally, at that same time, as an example of how God moves through people, I met a young psychiatrist who said, I know you've been through all the psychiatrists in the world. I know you've been in mental institutions. I know you've been to Synonym. I think I can help you. He took me in and gave me tests that I had never had done before. And within a month's time, I felt positive, optimistic, and normal. And I've felt that way ever since. And I've never used another drug since that day.
Take a break. Be right back. Rock and rollers from the 60s when we return.
Big Charlie, the teenage crush. They don't know how I feel. Big Charlie, the teenage crush. Let me go like this. Yeah, the name of the dance is the Peppermint Twist.
That song, of course, was the Peppermint Twist. And the rock and roller who made it a hit is here with us today. Please welcome Joey D of Joey D and the Starlighters. Today we're talking with big stars of the 60s. The trip up, what happens there, and then the trip down. Joey, do you miss those glory days?
I certainly do. Because on any given night, I worked at a place called the Peppermint Lounge in New York City. In my audience, I'd have people like John Wayne, Judy Garland, Shelley Winters. It was just a fantastic time to go to work.
Give me just a little background. Here's a guy, simple little guy, and suddenly...
I beg your pardon.
Well, I don't think you walked around in your Pampers saying, I'm going to be a star. When did it all happen?
Well, I grew up in Passaic, New Jersey, my hometown.
Choir boy.
An altar boy, yes. And I went to high school with the Shirelles. And this was my connection with music. While they were going to school, they had a hit record. And I said, isn't this neat? And I started a little band. And I asked them if they could introduce me to Florence Greenberg, who was the owner of their record company, Scepter Records. And they did, and we passed the audition. And we were on our way. Then we got a booking at the Peppermint Lounge in New York City. And one night we had some society people come in and actually do the twist with some of the kids that were in the audience. And when that happened, there was a newspaper columnist in the audience by the name of Charlie Knickerbocker.
Oh.
And he wrote about it, and the next day some celebrities came in and actually got up and tried this dance. And then more people came in and more people. And within like a week's time, Life magazine came in to do shows. All the television networks came in. It was just a wonderful place to work.
Did it hit too much too soon for you, in your opinion? Were you able to handle it?
Yeah, I think I was able to handle it. Fortunately for me, I didn't have the problem that Tommy had to endure. I didn't ever have a drug problem. I think what made me survive this period was that I came from a large family with 10 children. And we had a great sense of humor in our family. And we laughed a lot. And we didn't take ourselves that seriously. And I think that's what made me endure.
And that's what kept you going?
Yes.
What about the trip down? Now,
Well,
let me be honest. I've always had this image that someday I'm going to be in your chair on a talk show. And I'm going to sit there, and there are going to be a lot of people in the audience who are going to say, no, I've never heard of you. And I'm going to say, yeah, I used to do a talk show.
Oh, Mike Douglas, you know. If Mike Douglas were to come out now, there'd be many people in the audience say, Mike who? And he was one of the biggest talk show operators out there.
Well, if we're walking along the street and we see Chubby Checker, we probably know who Chubby is. We probably say, there's Chubby Checker. But without being insulting, there are going to be people who will know the twist and know Chubby and not know you.
Yeah. The more unfortunate is the fellow who's being inducted into Rock and Roll's Hall of Fame this year, who wrote and created the original dance, Mr. Hank Ballard. So if anyone didn't get any recognition because of the dance, there's a gentleman who has the biggest beef. And never got a dime royalties, by the way, either, for writing this song.
Never got
So he's got a great story to tell as well.
Why do we know Chubby that much more? What's the difference?
Well, the difference was back when I was at the Peppermint Lounge, his management brought him up from Philadelphia, where he came from, got him on stage, got in contact with Ed Sullivan, and that's where he beat my management to the punch.
He beat you to the punch?
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about the slide down. How bad did it get?
Well, I agree with Tommy. With the influx of the British groups in 1964, just about every American group that was successful was no longer successful. We were relegated to Holiday Inns and places of that ilk. And you're right, there'd be 2 or 3 people in the audience, and nobody really cared. But once again, I'd reach back into my sense of humor, and in my imagination, which was very vivid, and I think the place was packed, and I was having a grand old time. And I'm from the school of performing whether there's 3,000 people or 30,000 people or 3 people, you still do a good show. And I still do that to this day.
Okay, but you're in Sheboygan, and it isn't the Paramount.
It's not the Brooklyn Fox, and it's not the Madison Square Garden. But I worked all of those places. And once you become number 1, there's only one way to go. No one stays at number 1 indefinitely. I consider myself to be a rock and roll survivor. And I'm happy with my career, and I love singing my songs, as opposed to some people who don't like singing their songs anymore. Every time I get up on stage and I do Peppermint Twist, it's a new experience for me. And whenever there's an audience out there, I'll sing the Peppermint Twist and dance, and hopefully the people will like Joey D for being real about it.
In the early 60s, my guest made this song a #1 hit. The song, 2:45. The singer, Gary U.S. Bonds. Welcome him. Gary, of course, that wasn't your only hit, yet you two reached a time when you were in the lounges during the late 60s. How did you handle the tough times?
I drank right along with them. So
At least you're honest.
So did I.
Isn't that great? Bad drink or just
Oh no, I
block
had
it
some
out?
good ones.
You had some good ones.
A lot of good ones. No, that was yeah. It was kind of depressing there for a while. I mean, you get out there, like you say, you had 2 or 3 people, maybe. You know, I remember being in Detroit just after Christmas. This was, I guess, in the early, late 70s. And there was like nobody there, because everybody was out Christmas shopping. And who cared except for maybe 2 or 3 guys that were still working that had to be in Detroit for some cotton festival or whatever they were doing, you know. And they're there to pick up the girls or whatever, or cocktail waitress, you know, and you're just standing there singing, and they're drinking, so you, excuse me, and you go over to the bar with them, you know, and you have a drink. Before you know it, you're having a good time. And nobody's there but you.
What happens the next morning when you wake up and you realize it's Christmas time and I'm not rich anymore?
Well, you know, if you did have any money left, you sent it home, you know, to buy whatever presents you could for your daughter, well, in my case, my daughter and wife, you know, and that was it. And you just kind of handle it. It was rough, but you try not to think about it, you know, try not to let it get to you. Because you always have that hope that it's going to happen again one day. You know, it's going to get better, and you believe that. I think we as survivors we never. I mean, we can be 83 years old and go, next week I should have a hit record. You know, I know it's going to happen.
Eternal optimists.
Yeah.
Tell me about performing one day and Bruce Springsteen.
That was during my Holiday Inn trip, and we were working in Jersey, and he came in, him and a couple of other guys. And,
Do you know who he was?
No, I have no idea who he was, because by that time I was in Sheboygan. I didn't know what was going on in New Jersey. He was a big star in the tri-state area at the time. I think he had just his first album out then. And they all knew him, but I didn't. And he walked in, and he had dungarees. I should have gotten a clue then. They didn't throw him out because
And
he
he
had
was
on
wearing jeans,
dungarees,
yeah.
you know. And he came up and he asked if he could sing a couple of songs, and I went, sure, because that would give me a chance to get to the bar, you know. And I announced his name, and like everybody went, wow, the people that were there, you know, they went, oh, Bruce. And I go, who's this guy? You know, funny looking guy with dungarees on. How did he get in here anyway? He got up, we played, we did Quarter to Three and a couple of Chuck Berry type songs and stuff. Had a ball. He's a super guy. He's a really nice guy. And from there we became friends, and I guess about 2 or 3 years later we went and did the album.
What was the song on that album? I was trying to think about that.
This Little Girl Is Mine, dedication album. Yeah. That was a goodie.
Raindrops, so many raindrops, it feels like raindrops.
Song called Raindrops was the #2 song in 1961. It sold millions. The man who made it a hit is here with us today. Please welcome Dee Clark. By the way, the #1 song on the chart that year was?
That guy in the black leather pants.
Was what?
Yeah, you did it.
I did it?
You did
Gary
it.
U.S. Bonds, you got it. Dee, life didn't turn out the way you dreamed it would be. Did you ever think that something would not go right and you'd be living in a $38 a week hotel, motel?
No, I thought I would have another 5 or 6 years, good years, but it just don't last forever, and I just had to do a little suffering, Sally.
A lot of suffering.
A lot.
Your health, what happened with your health?
Well, 2.5 years ago, I came down with a stroke, and it took my voice away. Luckily, it's back now. I'm a little laryngitis right now. I've been rehearsing a lot with a new band. I have a new show, but the stroke kind of set me back. The left side of my body is kind of still. I go to therapy twice a week now, and hopefully I'll be walking right, but I'm singing right.
Are you, Are you still in the motel? Are you still in the same place in the motel?
Yes, I am, in Toccoa, Georgia.
Where? What is it called?
The
Toccoa?
Lone Oak Motel Apartments.
Don't you think we ought to give that woman a plug because she's been...
Miss Irene Roberts, please do.
Yes.
And the reason we said that is there was a lot of time when you couldn't pay the rent, and Irene didn't say, out you. She said, it's okay.
That's right.
And you're still there, and I think nice people need to be remembered for those things.
That don't really happen that often for entertainers.
No, well, yeah,
You know,
it does,
She took me in
unfortunately.
like a part of the family, and I love her and the whole family, and I'm there now, and I just would hate to ever leave, I tell you.
Right. Okay, my next guest is a man whose name is synonymous with rock and roll. This man is the idol to any of us who've ever spun a record. Gosh, they don't do that anymore, do they? He's been on the radio almost as long as me, 31 years. You know him as Cousin Brucey, Bruce Morrow.
Hey. Cousin
You played the records of the 50s and 60s. help us today. I need your help to put this into perspective. What went on? Why did so many of these pioneers...
Before I get into my diatribe, may I say one thing to you personally, in front of all this audience? I've done a lot of these shows, and you, my cousin Sally, are the very first. And I don't want to sound patronizing, but you've made me very happy because I was very concerned about this show for my kids, and these are my children. That's how I feel about them. You are the first person that has treated early rock and roll, and we call the golden age of rock and roll, with respect and given it dignity, and I thank you. Thank you. You know,
now I need some help. What's going on here?
well, very simple. Let me give you a perspective. Let me give you the picture. When these kids started, we're dealing with 1954. In 1952, we used to call this music race music, a lot of it. We weren't allowed to play it. It was only played on certain black stations because America didn't want to hear black artists singing so-called, we didn't call it rock and roll at that time, it was just called race records. Suddenly, these people who wanted all their lives to sing, and they've waited years and years to get on a stage and do something, were given an opportunity. They were in showbiz. Finally, they were in showbiz, going to towns, and a lot of them couldn't even stay in white hotels. But all they wanted was an audience. It's pathetic what happened. See, in those days, they were in showbiz. They should have been in the biz of show. You see? Today, we're in the business. Cousin Brucey went on the radio, was the radio business. Today, Brucey is in the business of radio. Get my point? They were not businessmen. They were show people, they were artists, they wanted an audience, they just wanted to get up there and make people happy, and they did it. You know what's nice about what's happening here? There's not anything to feel sorry for here. These people are proud, they're successful people. They are every one of these people here, plus hundreds and hundreds out there that I represent today, are very successful. We have a very serious problem in this nation, Sally, as you know better than I do. We are measuring everything, success equals dollars. What does that mean? No. Success here is making people happy, achieving what you want to achieve, and be allowed to continue to achieve success. That's success. I have 3 kids. My 3 kids, when I was a child, if my dad said to me, hey, I'm going to buy you a car, and I'd say, gee, a Ford, give me something used, anything, Dad, with wheels on it. My daughter says last week, hey, Dad, how about that Beamer or Porsche? What? We've done this. You see, this is what I'm afraid of. So I want to make sure that these people who have created an indelible impression in everybody in this nation, I don't know about you, but I have never seen a studio with such warmth in it. Do you realize the warmth of these people in this studio? You know why? They love them.
Who ripped them off?
Well, I'm going to coin a couple new words. It's called commercial rape.
Who did this to them?
Well, the guys come up to him and say, hey, son, you want a place to sing? Don't worry about it. I'll get you a car. Don't worry about it. Leave everything to me. Trust me, boy. Trust me, Joey. Trust me, Dee. I'll take care of you. You do the singing, and you leave the driving to me. Well, they drove. He drove himself to the bank, and they gave Joey a car. They gave Dee a new suit of clothes. Tommy did very well. They gave him a house somewhere. Meanwhile, the guy has taken $8 million to his bank, and they're giving the kids $80,000, and most of it going to taxes. And suddenly the publishing disappears. This guy writes all kinds of songs. This guy writes all kinds of songs. Publishing suddenly, here, sign over here, son. They didn't know. Now, what has happened is very, very simple.
The record companies did it, the managers did it?
No, not the record companies. This was in the early days. People who represented them, the so-called managers, these were entrepreneurs. I have other words, but I will not say that on this show. If this is one of your competitors' shows, I say it. But I will not say that naughty word. I don't talk like that. They were ripped off. Let
me go for a break for a moment. We've got a million thoughts.
Oh, that's getting me hot now, you see.
Yeah. All right, get your gander up. I ain't down yet.
I just want to say that 25 years ago, with this panel here, you couldn't have gotten near this building.
You got it.
Thank you.
I just want to address it to Joey D. I don't know if he remembers me, but I remember him. We danced at the Peppermint Lounge. I think it was on 45th Street.
Together?
In the 60s. Very good. Whoa. Very good. We enjoyed it.
Isn't that great? How does that make you feel?
Do you attribute the demise of your careers then, as he says, to poor management or the changing of public taste?
Well, firstly, it's not a demise of any careers. We're still all active. We're still working and singing. I think in part for the not working in the high-profile places because of new people in the industry.
See, we must get this point across. These people are not demise. They're not dead. They are survivors of the early time. They are working, most of them.
I don't know.
Dee Clark can't get his throat back.
Wait,
because
we're
he's
going to
working.
go through where everybody is now. Let's go.
This concerns alcohol and drugs. What advice would you give to young musicians of today?
Well, I have some advice for them. First of all, many people that use drugs or alcohol use them because they're really depressed individuals. And no matter whether you're temporarily or chronically depressed, as I was, you should go and seek some good psychiatric counsel. There is help out there for you. And, of course, the first thing you should do is realize that drugs and alcohol are not the solution to your problem. Put them down, say a prayer, make your life a walking prayer to God, and it works.
Who do you think some of the better artists are today?
Bon Jovi. I like him.
I say Prince, Michael Jackson, Springsteen.
I have a comment. I wasn't even born in 1961, but I remember the Peppermint Tour, so I'm glad that I came today.
Thank you. Thank you.
I paid her to say that.
Gary, I'd like to know your opinion on rap music.
Pardon?
Gary's for Gary. I'd like to know your opinion on rap music.
I like some of it. I mean, some of it's a little strange to me, but I guess about 50% of it is really nice, though.
This is directed to Gary U.S. Bonds. I just want to tell you, you gave me many years of pleasure dancing to 2:45, and I'd like to know, are you doing anything more with it? I know that, like, this little girl of mine I liked, but I haven't heard anything recently. Are you doing any more?
Well, it's been hard, but I think I might have a deal to go in January and start an album, and I still got my fingers crossed.
Yeah.
This is to Tommy. When you see the new musicians of today, what goes through your mind since you've been through the drugs and hard times and so forth? Do you say to yourself, gee, I really have a message for these people?
Not really. I don't consider myself an individual that has important messages for anyone. I like a lot of what's going on today, and I'm out there working all the time doing concerts, and I do a lot of it, and I admire a lot of the young musicians. If anyone asks my opinion about something, I'll try to give them my opinion as best I can.
I'm really curious to know, to the panel, during the slow times in your career, did you lose a lot of fair weather friends?
Ah, great question.
Yes, all of them, as a matter of fact.
No, but address that seriously for a moment, along with something else. We can blame the British for coming over. We can blame managers. Is there something you did wrong, something you do differently? Let's be positive about it. Something that you would do differently today that you didn't do then. Can we start with you?
Mr. Sally.
Would you do something differently?
Is there something you would do differently today? Was there something you did wrong, or something that you feel you could have done better with?
Well, I think that I was with a Dine recording company when I was doing my best. I was under contract with them, and I had to fulfill the contract, and that put in about 3 or 4 years, about 4 years waiting, and you can really get cold in about 4 years.
Sure can.
What about you?
I think if I had something to do differently than anything I've ever done, it would be to pray that I wasn't the kind of person that I was, so I could have done the whole thing much better than I did.
You would have done the whole thing
I would have
better.
done the whole thing better.
Sir?
You must remember, all of us were teenagers or just slightly in their early 20s when we signed these contracts. And in my particular instance, I would seek some good representation so I'd get some of the fortune along with the fame. We got all of the fame.
Well, I would have listened to Mom and invested.
Hi, it's very nice to be here today to see you all. I'm a doo-wopper from way back.
Good for you.
Tommy, I'm wondering, you have an identification with James Dean.
Yes.
And he was a depressed type of person, and you had your own depressed problems. Can you tell me why you look up to him?
Well, he was my first idol. I went to see East of Eden probably 150 times, and it seemed to me that he was me on screen. He said and moved and did everything that I always felt, and no one ever spoke like that for me before or since.
This is to Tommy. You have a daughter. How old is she, and do you have a good relationship with her now?
I have a wonderful relationship with my daughter, and she's now 12 years old.
Oh, wonderful.
She's the light of my life.
Great.
I don't have a question, but I would like to make a comment. I feel that the attitudes of all of these performers is so up and so great in spite of all that they've been through that I'm very proud and delighted to be here.
Thank you. What about, I have, Brucey, any of you, what about the royalties? We want to know if you guys get the royalties from those songs.
What royalties?
You know, to this day, Sally, these people, plus, as I said, hundreds of other men and women in our field, are still looking for their royalties. The record companies and people who are in charge, publishers of royalties, saying, you were paid, we'll look into it, this type of thing. I don't think they'll ever recover or recoup their royalties. But you know something? As important as that is to people like Dee, I think Dee and people like Joey and everybody else have said to themselves, hey, let's stay positive, let's go on from here. There are lawsuits all over the place, there are double groups all over the place, but that's what's so nice about these people, and that's why this music is as strong today, if not stronger, than it was at its inception in the 50s and 60s. They are positive, and they want to go on from here.
Joey? There's something that is very positive we want to talk about. Can you explain and give us a little background?
Yes, I started an organization called the Foundation for the Love of Rock and Roll. And I'm proud to say that everyone in the panel is a member of the organization. We have almost 200 members. And what we're attempting to do is to build a facility in Florida similar to the Actors Home. With the obscene amounts of money that are generated by rock and roll, literally billions every year, I would expect the record companies, magazines like Rolling Stone, anyone who's making a very good living from rock and roll to say, hey, let's kick in some money and take care of the pioneers, because we up here are doing better than most. There are some horror stories where, we just had an article written in People magazine, November 20th issue. And Thurston Harris, you may not know the name, but if I sang the song, Little Bitty Pretty One, worldwide hit. Here's a guy relegated to going through trash dumpsters, looking for aluminum cans and bottles to eke out a living. This is not a way to treat my heroes.
Dee here got himself in some trouble physically and really couldn't afford to take care of himself. Nobody gave him his Blue Cross card. He didn't have anybody to say, hey, pay my doctor bill. This man here, and I must say, everybody said it could not be done. He's a very quiet fellow, Joey Dee. He got all of us together and insisted, bothered the heck out of guys like myself until we said yes. And today, very proud to say, because of Joey, we are very close now to getting land and building a home. So Dee Clark, who will never have to do this again, but Thurston's and people like that in the future will have some place to go. Also,
Florence Ballard of the Supremes dies, 32 years old, broke.
Penniless, on welfare.
Penniless, on welfare.
The #1 group in the world.
Unbelievable.
Now, you started this idea how long ago?
2 years ago.
2 years ago, okay. In the 2 years, you're still saying we are getting close to having the money to buy it. I would have thought with the billions in rock that you would be rolling in money by now.
Well, very close. What we did the first 2 years is build a foundation for our foundation. We had to get the word out. We needed a basis. We've gotten to the point now where has donated an office in his complex in California for our West Coast representation. So we are accomplishing
But
lots of things.
how much do you have now? I'm very business.
We've earned, okay, we've only done several little concerts in and around the west coast of Florida, in the Tampa Bay area. And we also did a birthday party for Carl Gardner from the Coasters here in New York City. We raised a little over $100,000.
Now, but wait, $100,000 is, sir, help me with rock and roll.
What we need, look, Joey, let's not kid each other.
Please.
We need the record companies,
Exactly.
we made billions of dollars, or you guys made billions of dollars, to kick in a 0.5%.
There you go.
We'd be able to build our own world.
$100,000
Really.
is one.
But you
What
see-
is it on a rock concert
Nothing.
today?
But you see, the problem is the record companies, being very honest, I'm going to probably get in trouble for this, but I'm used to this. I have a big mouth. They're not interested in these people. Because right now, these people
Can't
are
do
not
anything for
producing.
them.
They're selling oldies. What do they care? You know, they want today's people. They need. We have to convince them that these are the people that gave them the ability to get their fortunes today. They've got to help.
How much do you need, guys?
What do we need, Joe?
We need $60 million. That's a projected
how
amount.
much?
60 million
60
over a 10-year period.
million.
What we're going to do is do a complete facility. We're going to have a rock and roll village, which will be a tourist attraction, so that it could perpetuate the
And
funding.
bring in its own money. Okay. We're not too good at math here, but they have 100,000. That's 1/6 of 1% of the money they need. Joey, do the people who are making millions today owe anything to rock and roll? To the early guys?
That's a good question. I know Bruce Springsteen was a great Roy Orbison fan. Michael Jackson, when he received the Grammy, said, "Thank you, Jackie Wilson, wherever you are." So every one of them had an idol from back then. None of them are out there now doing everything completely original. They learned from the pioneers of rock and roll.
Hi, I feel like I know you all. This is great. Tommy, this is for you. I know the seriousness of addiction and the lost years and the commitment to it afterwards. How do you reconcile yourself to that, to the lost years? And what is your life like now?
Well, I forget about the lost years and think of future years. I think about my daughter now and her growth as a human being. And my life now is very, very nice. I've just written a book. I have a year-round contract at a beautiful club called Brewbakers in Fort Wayne, and he lets me come and go and do concerts. And I'm just about to do my first record in 30 years with the Tokens and Paul Schaefer. So I'm excited about life, you know?
Joey? Besides working for the foundation, give us a quick update. I said we'd do this now.
Pardon?
Where are you now?
As far as what?
An update?
The foundation, well, we've...
Besides the
We've
foundation.
done this 2 years. We made a recording where we all did a record called For the Love of Rock and Roll. Should be released in early 1990. Our
No, I
executive...
meant you personally. Where are you now?
You meant me personally?
Okay, let's move
Hello,
on.
Tess.
Gary, where are you, Gary, in your life right now?
I'm, well, like I said, I'm recording. I'm still going out doing shows. You know, a few oldies here and a few contemporary shows also, because I did have that hit.
Cousin Brucey, what's up with you?
Well, with CBS FM in New York City, I have my shows. I have a network show called Cruise in America. I just signed a deal for 4 TV specials. My book is doing well, and I'm the happiest guy in the world. I got 3 great kids.
My question's for Tommy. I was wondering when was the last time you talked to Frank Sinatra?
Well, I expect to be talking to him right after my book comes out.
I like... And Gary U.S. Bonds, your cousin, is sitting right here, and she didn't want to say anything, so...
Yay, how you doing there? All right.
Great.
I'd like to find out how much formal education the members of the panel has, and also how much musical education you have.
Wasn't a lot, was it, guys? Formal education,
No.
and it wasn't a lot of music education.
You know, Sally, something I think we should let them know while we're talking about music, would you continue? This man here, Joey D, are you aware in his original band at the Peppermint Lounge, he started Jimi Hendrix? Do you know that most of the Rascals started with his band and the Ronettes were his dancing girls? Hendrix started with this guy's band. That's the kind of formal education.
Cousin Brucey, when I hear your voice, I'm transported back to 1960, and I'm in my grade school years and high school as well. And I was wondering what you feel about the current radio personalities who use shock as part of their format.
Cousin Brucey, she's
Well, let me
talking
get
to
into
you.
that.
She's talking to you.
Do we have about 4 hours? I believe radio is a tabernacle. It sounds very corny, but when I come into somebody's home, I want them to escape. I want them to give them the music. I want to give them a good time. I do not like when these guys, I call them schlock, shock, jocks on the air. I do not think people should have any profanity on the air. I think we have enough of that in the streets. I think radio must be cleaned up.
How do you sum it up? Rock and roll lives, thanks to these guys and Cousin Brucey.
Hey.